All right, guys, I just want to welcome back to the Everything College Football podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be discussing Week 4, recapping some of the biggest games in college football that took place this past weekend. Looking at Florida State and Clemson, I picked Clemson to win this game in the regular season, doubled down on it before this game. And the Tigers had the number here, Nick, but they let this one slip away from them, I thought. Starting with this Florida State offense for the second time this year, we've, been proven that they can win with their passing attack. They put on a clinic against LSU, and they did it again here with a run game. I expected them to struggle. It's a big reason why I picked them to lose this game. Thought they would get clobbered on the interior. 20 carries for 22 yards. They didn't look to incorporate much Jordan Travis work, and obviously he has a banged-up shoulder, so it kind of explains that. But this was not a good running game at all. They had a 12-yard carry from Trey Benson to help uplift that number. Other than that, though, Nick, it was a colossal failure. Couldn't even get an inch or two on the ground. What do you make of this FSU offense where Jordan Travis and his receivers finally got some momentum going in the second quarter and rode it throughout the rest of the game? They were scoreless in the fourth. But a big-time reception by Keon Coleman put him over the top. Him and Wilson both had 85-plus yards and a combined 2 touchdowns. What do you think of this FSU passing attack?
This is a very good passing attack, and it looked good against a pretty solid Clemson secondary that has some solid, hard-hitting pieces. Jordan Travis, 21 of 37, 289, 7.8 yards per throw, and 2 touchdowns on the day. Johnny Wilson, 94 yards receiving. Keon Coleman, 86 yards receiving. Coleman had the 2 touchdown receptions for this team. Jordan Travis and this offense, they couldn't run the ball at all. Like you said, 20 carries for 22 yards. Travis, he had negative yards, and include the sacks. He did have 1 touchdown on the ground, though, in the second quarter. Overall, though, I think this Florida State offense shows that they are able to balance and attack when they find themselves in a tough situation here. Ideally, on offense if you're Florida State, but if you have to be made one-dimensional and suffer through that and have to throw the ball as much as they did, it's proven that they could do that and win games when the running game is not really working for them. This Florida State offense is very good. This Florida State team as a whole is very good. This is a huge win on the road at Clemson. I think this says a lot more about Clemson than it does about Florida State. We're going to get that in a second. But overall, Florida State fans should be very happy. They showed up and beat a really tough opponent on the road. And now they have basically controlled their own destiny here. They have the best path to the CFB, in my opinion, of any team. The best resident right now, beating LSU. And so far, a strong resume and a very good spot.
Jeremiah Byers at right tackle, one of those transfers. He got absolutely cooked all game long, though. TJ Parker, Xavier Thomas, some of those guys were really just working against him. And then on the interior, those guys significantly struggled. Casey Roderick, Maurice Smith. I didn't think they were great against the run, but they were able to get it done. They were able to hold up well in pass protection, enough for those receivers to start cooking. Travis made some really great throws that really helped that passing attack pick up steam, because separation was not ideal for them, especially in the early part of this game. And really, for the most part of this contest, they're not able to separate those individual receivers and the great throws, great pairing, great chemistry they have on offense. For Clemson, though, we've seen them, completely melt down against Duke with numerous opportunities in the red zone, and they walked away with pretty much no points, where they scored 7 points in that game total. The downhill running game really was good in this contest. 146 yards total for them. Phil Moffa, Will Shipley, nice balanced attack. Cade Klubnik even had a touchdown on the ground. Very nicely timely pickups as well, I think, was the story for them in the first half of this game. Obviously, under 150 yards on the stat sheet isn't great, but against this run defense in games like this, timely pickups, 5 and 6 yard carries when you need them is certainly going to be something that you want to look for. And that's what Clemson was able to do. I was very impressed with the toughness they were able to show on the ground. Cade Klubnik, this is one of the best games I thought I've ever seen him play. 283 on 25 of 38 passing with a touchdown. The receivers were able to get separation. Tyler Brown really stepped up, 5 grabs, 84 yards, showcasing his speed. They were able to dish it out to a variety of different guys downfield. The FSU safety group. This is a group that I've been critical of in the past. Akeem Dent, one of their starters, was out, so that certainly didn't help them. And they got pressured downfield. Outside really messed them up too, with some curls and slants, off accurate throws from Klubnik. I thought this was a very impressive performance from Garrett Riley and his offense. At the end of the day, you only score 24 points. You don't get the job in overtime with a pretty horrendous call where it was 3rd and 1 instead of running downhill, which had worked for them all game, Nick. They go with a screen, and that was pretty much all she wrote for this contest when they decided to do that. But I think this FSU offense, or Clemson offense rather, showcased something that we were waiting for them to do. I think that's going to set them up from good riddance the rest of the year.
The offense did look good. I think the play calling is still very questionable. Garrett Riley had bad calls at the end. At one point, right at the end of the game, they really didn't seem set at all, and they ended up running the clock out. They could have run one more play, get a Hail Mary attempt before going to overtime, which is a poor decision-making. There were poor decision-making on the drive before that led to the missed field goal that set up overtime as well. and poor play calls in overtime that cost them, like you said, that screen pass on 3rd and 1 when you really were dominating. You had Florida State's number on the ground at that, especially in the second half of that game. Phil Maffa, 69 yards on the ground, 6.9 yards for carry. Will Shipley, 67 yards on the ground, 1 score for him. Klubnik had 10 yards on the ground and a score as well. Klubnik looked dialed in. He was able to spread the ball out, hit a bunch of different players with Brown, Barringstool, Stallo, Shipley, Maffa, Bo Collins, all got different numbers of catches. They were all kind of got some love in this game. I am concerned about Clemson, though. I think this is a bit of an issue for Clemson here. Dabo finds himself in a tricky situation here at 2-2 at the end of September. This team has been disappointing the last few years. They really seem to be struggling to figure it out. This is a bad loss at home, and this is a lot of question marks about this defense and this offense, in my opinion.
Yeah, in the preseason, I picked Clemson to lose to Miami. You got that game coming up in a couple weeks for Florida State, though. They got Duke, Miami, and Florida. 2 of those games being at home, the 2 conference games, that is, against ranked opponents. And then, of course, on the road at the Gators. We'll see if there's anything there. But like you said, this is a team that certainly has a good path to the playoffs. We said after the LSU game, where are they going to trip up? Because they seem to do that every year where they stumble. Well, that was the game against Boston College, we think, where they were able to escape that one on the road there at Chestnut Hill. So this team, Nick, they're certainly working out the kinks. And I think this running game, though, maybe not in conference play, maybe against Miami, maybe even Duke can showcase some nice presence as well when slowing down that run. But I'm not really going to be too worried about it until maybe the playoffs, because if they put up that same effort in the trenches, at least on the interior when it comes to running the ball, that could be a big problem for them if they want to win a national title if they do make the playoffs.
They certainly need to figure out the running game. I do agree with you there. They got plenty of opportunities to get the test. They're going to play a Miami team that has a very good interior defensive line that is going to cause them some issues. That's going to be a huge bellwether test for them. Can they win that battle? Duke's also pretty good. Duke was able to shut down the run at points against Clemson. They got torched at other points, so that might not be the best comparison. Overall, though, Florida State, very good spot here. They control their own destiny. They're in a good position. I'm excited to see what the Seminoles team can do.
Nice shift down to South Bend. This was a game that a lot of people had their eyes on. And, I figured that Notre Dame would probably be the favorite coming into this one when we talked about it last week, just considering how these 2 teams have fared early on this season. Kyle McCord, he probably would have got a lot of the blame if the Buckeyes lost, but I thought he played a pretty fine game. 21 of 37, 240. Wasn't perfect by any means, but this is a guy that seemed calm, cool, collected, showcased some confidence. He almost made a drastic mistake, though, where he, was late on a throw on that final drive that should have been interception, should have sealed the deal. But with right before they got to the 1-yard line, he makes a great throw with confidence. Him and his receiver were on the same page. I mean, Kyle McCord did that a handful of different times. With 3rd down, pressure in his face, he's able to drop it off. He knows where his routes are. That's exactly what you want to see from a young Buckeye quarterback, Nick. I think Kyle McCord certainly passed this test here on the road. Again, it wasn't perfect, but I think this is a very admirable effort here from the young guy.
I was very impressed with him as well. I thought he looked good. That last drive certainly concerned me. If they were going to lose that game, it would have been on the last drive, right? When you look at what happened, he had that intentional grounding penalty on 2nd and 10, about 15 seconds left. He had that incomplete pass, like you said, that should have been intercepted. The safety came over and made a great play on it and just barely missed grabbing it, and someone behind there could have maybe made a play and grabbed it, but they were just a little short on it. But he looked composed. Then they go to the goal line, 2 incomplete passes on the goal line, which I was questionable about those play calls. And score time expires. Thought it was a good coached game plan there by Brian Hartline. I liked what they did on that last drive. McCord, I think he looked really good. McCord shook off a lot of the haters. He's a young guy in a first real high pressure situation on the road. South Bend, it was very loud there. You could hear it through the TV. 21 of 37, 240 and 6.5 yards per attempt. It's a pretty good number. No touchdowns, no interceptions, but he didn't make any mistakes. They found good ability to carry the ball. He spread the ball out to his receivers. It wasn't Marvin Harrison Jr. was not really the guy stepping up like you thought. Case Stover, Amika Abuka were the guys that really stepped up. Stover, 7 receptions, 52 yards for him. Abuka, 7 receptions, about 100 yards. So they spread the wealth. This is a very balanced offense. We saw that when they aren't fully clicking, they can still find a way to win games because the defense can keep them in it.
That 61-yard rushing touchdown put them up 10-0 from Travion Henderson. They only had 126 on the ground total, 104 from Henderson. That game winner from Trainham as well at the goal line, where Notre Dame only had 10 players on the field. Sam Hartman, he certainly struggled more so than not under pressure. I think Jim Knowles was really starting to figure that out about the quarterback from Wake Forest when he was with the Demon Deacons. That was certainly a struggle area for him. Didn't turn the ball over. Almost had one at the end of the game. Went off the fingertips at JT Tumau, 17-25, 175. I thought he played a pretty good game. This running game, they were here focused. They wanted to run downhill. 176 yards rushing. They were able to get this ground game really going in that third and fourth quarter. They're really starting to eat up clock. That 61-yard rushing touchdown by Ohio State really didn't do their defense any favors, Nick, which is crazy to say, but sometimes game flow, that's how it works, where these guys were already on the field a lot, instantly score, and they're right back out there, and that really did help this defense out. Audric Estime, 70 yards. He's pretty bottled up the entire game. Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price. They have a great rotation of backs here for them. Thought they really showcased from a physicality standpoint. They can play with the big boys, but I thought Ohio State, 4.5 yards per carry allowed against Notre Dame. That's a pretty admirable effort. 176 total on 39 carries. Watching this game, the Buckeyes did really good against the run. They had that one drive when they gave up a touchdown in the third quarter where they weren't as polished. They only held them to 50 rushing yards in the first half. They had like 70, I think, or so, 50 to 70 on that one drive in the third quarter alone. So for the most part, Nick, the Buckeyes were very stout here against the run of a defensive line, and I figured would pass this test, and I think for the most part they did.
Ohio State's defense was great. I do think that Notre Dame's offense looked good despite only scoring 14 points. I think the numbers were impressive. Hartman 175, 17 at 25, 1 touchdown. He looked composed, didn't make any mistakes. I think that was the big key, was making sure he didn't make any mistakes. Estimine 70 yards on the ground, 14 carries. Love, Price all had some good carries as well. Guberby, Prine, he had the one score, 18 yards on the ground. So I really think this Notre Dame offense was impressive. They did lose the battle in the trenches, right? Ohio State did win the battle like we thought they might, and they dominated on the interior. That was the key that you and I both picked out. I said if Notre Dame was going to win that game, they had to get the battle right there. You said if Ohio State was going to win, they had to get the battle right. No, Ohio State gets the job done. I think Notre Dame, this loss says more about Notre Dame than it does about Ohio State for me. I think Notre Dame let this one get away. They could have won this game, controlled their own path to the playoffs. When you only have 10 players on the field in the final play of the game, that's just poor coaching from Marcus Freeman. Probably, part to do with his youngness and a bit immaturity as a young head coach. He's a very young head coach. Having 10 players on the field is just pathetic. You can't be making, especially considering that they had an unbalanced number of players, including on the side where the rush went down on the left side. They were unbalanced on the left side. Totally inexcusable from Notre Dame. If I'm a Notre Dame fan, I'm just pissed that we let this one get away, because you certainly had a good opportunity in South Bend to make a statement win and put Ohio State on watch, put the nation on watch. Notre Dame really blew this. Ohio State gets that big win though, and Ryan Day gets that huge win against a program. There were a lot of talk in the pregame, leading up to it, that he has lacked the ability to beat the bigger schools and struggled against the schools like Michigan, Alabama, Ohio State, or Georgia, schools like that. He went on the road. This Buckeyes team as they move into the rest of the season.
Yeah, Benjamin Morrison, for the most part, had Marvin Harrison's number. That was a great battle to watch all night. Mitchell Evans at tight end, he finally was able to step up for Notre Dame, so they're starting to carve out a nice role there. That's usually a big part of this football team. They had 3 receptions as a team of 20-plus yards. That is something that's certainly encouraging, because this is a team that we know, Notre Dame, they want to play with some nice balance in this game. They certainly had ideal balance, just was not enough to grind them down and finish the game, because they were not able to do that for 4 quarters. They got shut out in that first half. So even though, some people probably disagree with you saying Ohio State won in the trenches, I would say they certainly did for 4 quarters. That one drive in the third quarter, you take that away, and then I think in the fourth quarter on that touchdown drive, they had some nice runs as well. Other than that, though, it's the entire body of work here. Notre Dame was not able to do that. 3-point loss, though, at the end of the day. Great finish. Came down to the buzzer. Buckeyes get the job done. What's their future outlook, Nick? Because the young quarterback passes the test. He's got this experience in his back pocket now. The running game, the offensive line. They weren't the greatest, but they certainly were serviceable here. Is this team still on your radar for being national champions?
You're certainly happy if you're a Buckeyes fan waking up on Sunday morning. This is a big test that they pass, but of course the road gets tougher as they go on. The next big test is certainly hosting Penn State on the 21st. That's going to be a big matchup. Penn State had a really good weekend. We'll get to them a little bit later in the episode. And then, of course, the big one in the end of November at Michigan. That's the one that's going to decide it all, really, at this point. Also, you can't overlook they got to host Maryland next week. Maryland's got some good point scoring ability. They're unbeaten 4-0, right? Some other teams coming up the schedule. Wisconsin's been disappointing, but certainly still going to be a tough road trip for them. Other teams have been playing above their weight, punching above their weight recently. So I think this Ohio State team's in a good spot. This is a huge win that you want, obviously, for this team. You got to be very happy with this. Overall, I would be happy with Kyle McCord's performance. I'd be happy with an Ohio State fan. You're probably in a good spot here. You got to just go out and win the games. You got to beat Penn State. Got to beat Michigan. That's the pathway.
Looking at some other notable scores, what was a jam-packed weekend? Oregon, Colorado, we knew it was coming for this Buffalo's team that's not very good, was going to meet their maker, and that's what they did here. They met a team that is actually a good football team. Travis Hunter being out was certainly evident. Troy Franklin was carving him up, 8 grabs, 126, and 2 touchdowns. They had balance all game long, 240 rushing and 3 scores. Bo Nix, he had a bad interception on an underthrow, where he probably would have had a touchdown if he doesn't. Other than that, though, he was pretty perfect. 28-33, had 276 and 3 touchdowns. Also found one on the ground. You know, the cameras were rolling before this one. Coach certainly in Dan Lanning, he knew that they were rolling when he made the comment that Colorado was here for clicks and we're here for wins. I want to kind of get your thoughts on that, Nick, and what that was about, and overall the performance here where Oregon, they took it a little easy in that second half, only put up 1 touchdown, 7 total points. Colorado, they were able to salvage some points in garbage time to make the margin a little bit closer. But this was a complete beatdown as expected.
This was a beatdown. You know, I think Oregon and Dan Lanning especially, you know, he doesn't really like what Colorado's doing. Dan Lanning has built a respectable program. I think I mentioned this in a previous episode where you got this program in Oregon that has been building and getting close to being a national contender, competing for a national championship with Bo Nix, building the solid offense, and they've gotten no love in the preseason because all the love's been going to Colorado. I think Dan Lanning kind of saw that in the media and saw that his program was getting ignored. When you look at the paper, I mean, Oregon's just a better team every way you look at it against Colorado, and they proved that by winning 42-6. This is a very good Oregon team that is super talented on offense and defense. I think Dan Lanning just had enough of the media ignoring his kids and his program, and they go out there and they put a beat down that on. He knew the cameras would be rolling. He said what he said, and he backed it up. You know, if you're going to talk smack, you got to back it up, and he definitely did that. This Oregon team impressed me. They looked very good in that first half. Bo Nix, I mean, phenomenal day in my opinion. 28-33, 276, 3 touchdowns plus the 1 bad interception. Bucky Irving, nearly 100 yards on the ground for him. He was really working hard. Noah Whittingham looked great. Ty Thompson, I mean, just a great balanced day. Receiving, Trayshawn Holden looked good. Tez Johnson. This was just a great day from Oregon. Oregon really showed up and did what they had to do, and I'm very impressed with the Ducks. They look like they're a real threat to win the Pac-12 with USC struggling against Arizona State. Oregon can certainly win this conference and be in the playoffs.
Colorado hosts USC next. It was just a disaster all the way around. Only 40 rushing yards. Sanders was sacked numerous times. He's still efficient, though, 23-33. That's one thing that certainly is underrated about his game, is he's highly efficient at all times. See what happens with Colorado moving forward after another big test. Looking down to Tuscaloosa, Alabama takes care of business against Ole Miss. You know, the Rebels got out early. They were able to put a touchdown on the board. And I said to you, I was like, they're probably going to end up punting 4 more times after that, or 4 times consecutively, rather, because I always point out how this offense, at least recently, is just incredibly inconsistent. And they only put up 3 more points the rest of the game after that. So I think that's something that's certainly a mix here of inconsistency mixed with a great Alabama defense. I just don't really know what has happened to Ole Miss. They just lack that same, energy that you think that they should have, like against Tulane. They come out absolutely on fire. 3 plays, score in less than a minute. Jackson Dart, red hot. After that, for the next, rest of the half, completely flat. Lane Kiffin certainly has himself a talented bunch here. Zachariah Franklin finally got to go. We only had 1 reception for 16 yards. This Alabama pressure was relentless. Dart ended up having an interception, 56 yards on 29 carries for this running game. That QB draw from Dart was the only touchdown that they on this contest. Alabama's looking very sharp on the interior. Guys like Tim Smith, Justin Igmany, and Dallas Turner at 3.5 TFL. These guys up front on the interior and at the outside linebacking positions, they're stepping up emphatically, which is huge for a team that is trying to find their footing on offense still.
I think we can lower the panic levels in Tuscaloosa a little bit. After losing to Texas at home, then struggling at USF, I think Alabama came out and showed that this team is still very competitive in what is a wide open West where there seems to be no real top team in the West right now. There's 5 teams at the top of the West, all kind of punching each other and battling it out. Alabama's defense was phenomenal. 5 sacks, 1 interception on Dart, made them uncomfortable the entire day. Stonewalled the rushing attack for Ole Miss. They had 56 yards on the ground and a couple of sacks, and then they had 1 touchdown with the Dart QB draw. The defense is phenomenal. This Alabama defense is better than I expect them to be. The secondary still worries me a little bit with the young guys like Downs and Jalen Key struggling. 7 of this defense is fantastic. Dallas Turner was an absolute wrecker. Yesterday, he got in the backfield several times, looked good. The interior looked fantastic as well. I'm a little concerned about the offense still. I think we're going to get to that in a second, but overall, this defense is fantastic for Alabama. They're really dominant. And when you're in a situation where the West is kind of wide open, like I said, and all these teams have their own individual struggles, having a really good defense like that can keep you in games when you have to play LSU, A&M, things like Arkansas, programs like that, it's very helpful when you have a dominant defense that can shut down and force punts over and over again.
Jalen Milroe, 17 of 21, highly efficient, 225 yards through the air, had a touchdown. The 1 pick, though, he had early on in the game was just awful. He threw it into the end zone where he was intercepted instead of taking the underneath receiver or they would have probably been inside the 5. If not, he would have scored. That's still an awful part of his game. 16 carries, 28 yards. He wasn't very good on the ground either. He did showcase some of his speed on some nice runs before sacks Ole Miss was able to collect. That really pulls his number down. So Alabama's team only 131. But Jace McClellan was able to, establish a nice rhythm and some physicality, rushing for 105 yards. Overall, I think this is a good game for Jalen Milroe. Certainly showcased good and some bad, continuing to take some steps forward. The one bad play, though, luckily for Alabama, they were able to win this game by 14, so people are probably going to forget about it. But when you look at the film room, on Monday, Nick, that's going to be one thing that certainly is a little disgusting.
Very bad interception in the red zone, just disgustingly bad play. You really can't be doing that. I thought the running attack was great. Jason McClellan, 170 yards, or 105 yards on the ground. One score for him. Roydell Williams had a few carries as well. They spread it out. They had really good balance. Threw it to Jalen Hale had a good game. Jermaine Burton, CJ Dupree, he looked good. Very good at blocking. Robbie Utes had a nice catch. Roydell Williams, Jason McClellan, all had catches. This offense is getting better. I'm still very concerned about it. I think that Alabama certainly has a lot of question marks for me, but the defense certainly helps. I think you can kind of lower the concern in Tuscaloosa a little bit. This team is in a decent spot. They'll probably lose one more game this season, but overall, I think they're in a good spot right now. They beat a very good Ole Miss, and now they can transition to the rest of conference play. They get to play Mississippi State on the road this week, which shouldn't be that big of a task. But they got the likes of Arkansas, LSU, Tennessee coming to town. They got to travel to A&M pretty soon. So certainly a little concerned, but overall, I think you can pump the brakes a little bit on Alabama being the dynasty over and all that. This defense is still very dominant.
Up to Salt Lake City, when Cam Rising was ruled out for this game, you figured it's probably going to be a sloppy contest. 14-7 final. Utes get the victory. They had a pick six on the first play of scrimmage. It looks like that's going to be the deciding factor in this contest. It was just awful all around. Dante Moore was not great. Nate Johnson made some foolish plays as well. Just an old school Pac-12 showdown where defenses are getting after it. Nick, I picked UCLA to win this game. Figured they'd have some nice balance, and they weren't able to. As a team, they had a net rushing of 9 yards. Negative 51 for Dante Moore. It's not like the backs were any better. Carson Steele had 29, TJ Harden 31. They both had 11 touches each. This is a team with the Utes that they're not very healthy one bit, but they were able to wrap up 7 sacks compared to UCLA, who had 4. They were just getting after it. Nick Jonah Ellis had 5 TFL. They absolutely abused this UCLA offensive line. Pick six looks like it was the deciding factor in this one, though. UCLA got on the scoreboard late in the fourth quarter. Thought they had a bit of a shot there, unable to seal the deal, though. This was just an ugly game all around. But the Utes, you got to be impressed with them continuing to survive and advance while they try to get healthy.
Certainly isn't impressive for Utah to get the job done. Dante Moore looked terrible in his performance, 15-35. Just a very poor number. Nate Johnson didn't look any better. Obviously, not having Cam Rising was a big issue. They were able to get some decent yardage on the ground for Utah, 100 yards on the ground, but it was only 2.1 yards per carry due to the fact that they rushed the ball 48 times. The receiving was not bad. Deuce Ville had a decent day with the 2 grabs for 57 total yards. Just a good defensive battle, like you said, a lot of punts in this game. I think this says that Utah has that ability to win these tough battles when they find themselves in a tough situation. Utah is still a very good team in this Pac-12. They're 4-0 at this point. UCLA, you wanted to see more of them on offense. Dante Moore just did not really put it together. Chip Kelly's game plan was very weak. You would have thought they could have come into Utah and beat a wounded team that was missing Cam Rising. They didn't step up to the occasion. Very disappointing UCLA fan.
Yeah, that touchdown drive they had late in the fourth, though, they were at their own 1-yard line at one point because that's how bad the drive had started. And they ended up scoring a couple plays later, so they showcased some nice resilience there. They did have a fumble on their second longest drive of the game, ended up fumbling on early on. So it's just tough for them. Utah, they're going to get the job done here, though. Oregon State looming in a couple of days for them. Utes, though, quietly making some noise here as they continue to stay undefeated. Look to Wazoo, 38-35 over Oregon State. Figured that Oregon State would be able to bring the physicality in this game. And I think they did that for the most part, but they're playing catch-up the whole contest. It really makes it hard to line up in the I formation, run downhill off play action when you're trailing like this because Washington State was just unstoppable. Cameron Ward, quarterback, I'd say, 28-34, 404, 4 touchdowns. The biggest question I had coming into this game was how would the Oregon State safety group do in the secondary as a whole, because obviously they replaced a lot of players in that positional group coming into the year. Failed the test, Nick. We found out what they were made of in the back end. 8 receptions, 159, and 3 scores for Josh Kelly. Kyle Williams got the party started of a 63-yarder on that first drive. He ended the day with 174 yards. This is just a great offensive showing from Washington State. They're showcasing some nice muscle here quietly. They're establishing a nice repertoire here in this conference. They're 4-0. They're making a case for why they should be picked up in the coming season. and beyond in a different conference. Cameron Ward, though, he's playing the ball I thought he'd be playing last season. I thought he left a lot on the table in his, his second year of Eric Morris as the offensive coordinator. Of course, Morris is now gone. But Ward, man, this is just elite football he's playing this season, not getting talked about enough.
Wow, Washington State was fantastic. They did almost blow this game. It's important to note that they gave up 21 points in the fourth quarter. Oregon State, they really fought back, made this a very close contest. Cam Ward's fantastic, 28-34, 404 yards, 11.9 yards per throw, and 4 touchdowns. They spread it out. The wealth was there. I mean, this is just a very good Washington State team. Cam Ward has really kind of stepped up and showed his form that he showed in an accurate Ward before he came over and became the quarterback here at Washington State. This team's for real. It's a very good Washington State Cougars team. They're very talented on offense. The defense still leaves some question marks. Oregon State had a decent day on offense as well. I think this is a big offensive shootout. The defense for both teams leave a lot to be desired, especially Oregon State getting torched in the secondary. But I like this Wazoo team a lot. They're exciting. They're fun. They really are battling here. They have a good young offense that is really putting up a lot of points here. 38 points. They put up a ton of yards, over 500 total yards of offense in this game. Very impressive what I saw at Washington State.
Yeah, only 14 points for the first three quarters for Oregon State. 21 there in the final frame. 242 rushing, 4 touchdowns. Deshaun Fenwick really got the ground game going for them. Martinez was good. Youngley even put up 61 yards and a touchdown on the ground. So the physicality finally took over. It just took them till the final 15 minutes. Too little, too late. So Oregon State, good to know that they can still ground and pound, and they can still kind of play the style of offense they want to. But the defense has to certainly be better. Lower scoring games are certainly better for the Beavers. They're getting ready to play Utah. Washington State, I haven't seen their schedule yet, but they already have a win now over a ranked opponent. They beat Wisconsin earlier this year. Washington State really starting to make some noise here. What do you think of the Pac-12, Nick? We had 2 ranked contests here. It really didn't get talked about much, but a couple of undefeated teams that can really make some plays here.
It is a shame the Pac-12 is dying because it seems to be in a really great spot. There's so many good ranked teams this year. Just looking at Oregon, Colorado, Utah, UCLA, Washington State, Oregon State, USC. All these teams are very talented, and they're all leaving the conference for the most part. It's really disappointing the conference is dying the way it is because I think the conference is in a great spot with the way the teams are. Washington had a great day against Cal as well. They're very good teams in this conference. Pac-12 needs to get a little bit more love here. They have so many ranked teams, so many talented teams. Of course, a lot of these teams have to play each other, so they're all going to beat each other at some point. But I certainly think that this is the year that the Pac-12 gets back in the playoff and has at least one team representing them. There are very good teams here, USC, Washington, all these teams that played that we just talked about, the 3 matchups between ranked teams we just talked about. The conference is very deep. It's very impressive, and I'm really excited to see what happens the rest of the season.
Look at Arkansas, LSU. Tigers win by 3, 18-point favorites. I figured the Hogs were good money to cover here in this one, but I really didn't think it'd be this much of an offensive showcase. Nice balanced approach from both teams. KJ Jefferson, 289 through the air, 3 touchdowns, ran for 48 yards, had 2 interceptions, though. Luke Haas at tight end. This guy, a freshman, 6 grabs, 116, 2 touchdowns. He ended up stepping up immensely for the Hogs, really made a name for himself in this one. They didn't have the greatest approach on the ground, a bit less than 4 yards per attempt. LSU, though, they were much better. Logan Diggs had 97 yards rushing. Daniels was limited to only 36, which is not great. But he was able to, once again, after a masterpiece against Mississippi State, showcase efficiency and big playmaking prowess through the air. 20-29, 320, 4 touchdowns. The duo of Malik Neighbors and Bryant Thomas continues to be headaches. 130-plus for both. They both also had 2 touchdowns each. This is just a dominant LSU passing game. It's really starting to take shape these last couple of weeks, Nick. Of course, 189 on the ground as a team. Nice balanced approach here from LSU. But the secondary, I think this is going to be something, as they really dive in the conference play, it's going to hamper them. This is twice now where they've just been completely abysmal. In that 59-yard touchdown they gave up, I believe that was on a 3rd down. They got him backed up, and Jefferson's able to evade, then find him downfield for an easy touchdown. So a lot of concerns here still of LSU. But if you got an offense that can outscore opponents, have at it.
Like I was saying earlier, I think the West is completely wide open. No team has really put themselves in as the best team in the SEC West. Arkansas, I didn't think they were going to battle here at all. I really didn't think that they would be competitive in this game. The spread was 18 points. I thought they would certainly lose by that margin. I really thought that LSU was in a good spot. But Arkansas fought this team. They just lost to BYU. Now they've lost back-to-back games in a row. I thought they were going to be dead and buried. But they showed some great fight. KJ Jefferson, 21-31, 289, 3 touchdowns. The 2 interceptions is pretty poor from him. They also looked good on the ground, 137 yards on the ground. This LSU defense is certainly concerning, giving up nearly 400 yards of total. Disappointing numbers from them. You need to see more out of them. just really weak numbers from that LSU defense. Daniels, though, he looked as good as we expected. He's just continuing to be a really good quarterback, arguably the best quarterback in the SEC, probably the best quarterback in the SEC. 20 of 29, 320, 11 yards per attempt, 4 scores for him plus the 1 interception. They found good balance, 320 passing yards through the air is fantastic, 189 yards on the ground. Just a good old offensive shootout in the SEC here. These teams both looked good. They both looked in certain situations, but again, I keep saying it, but the West is wide open. You really don't know which direction this is going to go in this division. The East is Georgia's, right? They're going to lock that up with no problem. The West, any one of these 5 teams could certainly win it here at the top. A very wide open division. Very exciting if you're a fan of SEC football.
In the last game we'll talk about, this was a ranked matchup. No one really cared to discuss it. I see why. Penn State 31-0 over Iowa, and I didn't really watch the game, so we'll just kind of try to get a tale from the numbers, Nick. Not exactly the most professional idea, but I mean, we can kind of just sit here and look at these numbers and figure out what happened. 166, 4 touchdowns for Drew Ayler. Guessing they had a lot of short fields, 25 completions, 57 rushing attempts for 215 yards. They were really just running clock here against a team that could not stay on the field one bit. 17 carries for Iowa attempts. This is just next level embarrassment for Iowa. Something has to change. The Ferentz need to be gone. At least Ryan does. They need to do something to change up this offense. 1 for 9 on 3rd down, 4 first downs. They were only on the field, I think, for about 35 plays or something like that. This is just ridiculous, Nick. I really don't know what to say here for Iowa. And, for people that watch this game, Penn State fans maybe, I don't know if the Iowa defense was bad or Penn State was just grinding down on them because they were on the field for, I think it was 97 plays. So these numbers could be a little bit skewed. You can sit here and maybe dissect this running game as not being that efficient, but when you have nearly 60 carries because you're really just trying to get to the end of the 60 minutes, I just don't know what to say, Nick. This is just next level awfulness.
I did watch a little bit of this game in between, at halftime during the Notre Dame game I watched in. One big issue here for Iowa, I do want to say there were a lot of special team errors. They had 2 punt situations where they touched the ball as the punting team and they kind of muffed it. If you want to say muffed it, it hit off of one of their defenders' back who was in the punt coverage, kind of bounced off his back and fell to a Penn State arm immediately. They also had another muffed punt at one point. So certainly special teams played an issue. It was a rainy day in Happy Valley. The whiteout obviously was very loud there at Penn State. Win this game, I thought 14 was a pretty easy love of the week in terms of spread. It's just absolutely embarrassing. This Iowa offense just looked bad. Cade McNamara came into the season and said, this is not your old Iowa offense. 56 yards passing, 20 yards on the ground, 76 yards of total offense is just pathetic. I don't know what the hell is going on in Iowa. They're just too old-fashioned to be competitive. They got absolutely dominated here. Jeweler looked good. He was locked in, 4 touchdowns. Only 166 yards passing, though. They did run the ball a lot. Like you said, nearly 60 times, 215 on the ground. I think Penn State are a very good team. It doesn't really matter to me that Iowa didn't score any points and had an anemic offense. They still are a very good defensive team. I think this says a lot about Penn State. Penn State could certainly be competitive here. They're going to have to put their money where their mouth is playing Michigan and Ohio State. It's a battle in the Big Ten. I think it's a 3-way battle there. I think all 3 of those teams are very talented. Penn State could certainly be the one that comes out of the Big Ten at Big Ten East at this point, with all things considered, with the way that things are going for them. The Nittany Lions looked good. I'm very impressed with them. Iowa, though, they got to figure something out. They're going to certainly fire the offensive coordinator, I would hope, at the end of the season, because this has just been a pitiful offense. Need to figure it out very soon.
Yeah, obviously, holding this team to 0 points isn't the biggest accomplishment in the world. You certainly look to other factors like not committing your own mistakes. 9 for 20 on 3rd, 4 for 4 on 4th. This is a team that's executing at a high level. Only 4 penalties, no turnovers compared to the 4 that Iowa had. So there's plenty of takeaways even from a game like this where you're playing a purely F-rated offense, which I said was C- coming into the year. I guess they're going to go ahead and get that demotion. But again, there's plenty of takeaways you can take here from Penn State because it's still a tough physical football team, especially on defense. Penn State, they showcased phenomenal execution here in this one. So moving forward, 2 teams moving in completely different directions. Iowa should never be ranked again, though.
Absolutely. I think, Penn State's in a very good spot. I think Iowa has a lot of question marks, turnovers. Penn State was just composed. They didn't let big whiteout game, rainy conditions, so certainly it was tough to pass. I like the way Penn State's going. They got a big schedule in front of them, so they have a lot of opportunities to prove their worth, which I think is the biggest thing here is, can Penn State keep up this momentum? They got to travel to Columbus in a few weeks, and they host Michigan at the tail end of the season, plus a trip to Maryland. That could be a sneaky tough trip for them. A lot going on in this Big Ten East. There are 4 really good teams in the Big Ten East right now: Penn State, Maryland, Michigan, and Ohio State. All 4 of them got to play each other. It's very interesting to see what happens. This division's very dominant, one of the best divisions in college football.
It's to be it for today's episode. As always, Nick, appreciate joining me. Biggest week of the year in college football, and these results from this past weekend are certainly going to linger the rest of the season.
Didn't disappoint. What a hell of a weekend it was.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.